For the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, still I rise. I rise, Mr. Speaker, as a liberated Democrat. I rise, Mr. Speaker, unbought, unbossed, unafraid. I rise, Mr. Speaker, as the only member of the House of Representatives to be removed from a joint session of Congress and thereafter to be censured. I have been censured, Mr. Speaker, but I have not been silenced. Censured, but not silenced. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in agreement with the President. This is indeed a dark day. Yesterday was a dark day. Dark days because of lives that have been lost. This day, the USA Today has published an article styled 24 years after 9/11, Alliances Fractured, referring to what happened on 9/11, the lives that were lost to terrorism. And then, Mr. Speaker, there's another article that I would call to your attention in the Washington Times. It is styled, Growing Left-Wing Violence, Blamed for Deadly Shooting. Mr. Speaker, I wish to address violence. I wish to address violence, and I wish to start by indicating that on yesterday, I published a tweet. And this tweet, Mr. Speaker, indicated in essence that this is the time for all persons of goodwill to take a stand against violence. And that persons should do this because Dr. King was right, and his words are right today. We must all learn to live together as brothers, he said, I would add, and sisters. We must all learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish together as fools. I did not know Mr. Kirk. I don't believe I've ever met him. I meet a lot of people, so I may have, but I don't believe that I have. But here's what I know about him. He was a human being. He was a child of the same Creator that created me. He had every right to express his views. He had every right to differ with me as much as he wanted to, and anybody else. He had every right to be where he was and to speak on the issues of importance to him in ways that I might not agree with. But he had a right to do this. He had a right to life. He had a right to say these things in venues across the length and breadth of this country, and I would say across the globe. These were his rights. He had the right to be where he was and to do what he was doing. I don't know him as a person who has said things that I would always agree with. But I want his wife and his children to know that I'm saddened by his demise. I'm saddened by the fact that he was assassinated. I'm saddened by it. It is painful. I regret that it happened, and if I could have prevented it, I would have. I don't believe that we should have a country that somehow would have people lose their lives, be assassinated, and then people gloat and celebrate an assassination. So I ask today, what did Mr. Kirk and the victims of 9/11 and the persons who have died in churches while praying, persons who were killed as they were praying in various religious institutions, children who have been murdered in schools. What do they all have in common? The one thing that they all have in common, and there may be others, is that they were innocent people. Innocent people. Innocent people going about their business. None of them were breaking the law. So this is bigger than any one of us or any group of us. It's bigger than any person's religiosity. It's bigger than where you happen to be at a given time. This is about the right to life and the right to speak freely. It's about what the Constitution affords all of us in this country, and about the necessity for every one of us to protect these constitutional rights. This is about people who have been born and fortunate enough to have been born in the United States of America, or people who have come to the United States of America. People who just happen to be passing through. It's about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and especially life, because without life you cannot have the liberty and the pursuit of happiness. All of these people have in common the fact that they were innocent and the fact that they have lost their lives, some to terrorism, persons who came to this country to impose and inflict terrorism upon people, and some from terrorists within the country, some from people who were just crazed, some from people who were persons that should not have had the opportunity to have the type of weaponry that they had. But they were all persons who were innocent, all persons who had this right to life that I stand for. And so today, I believe it appropriate that I first say a prayer. And then after the prayer, I'd like to make some comments about current circumstances. I don't ask everyone to pray with me. You pray with me if you desire. If you choose to do other things, then do those other things. But I pray this prayer for my country. Most gracious Creator, we know you by many names, but we also know that by any name you are the creator of all that was, is, and ever shall be. By any name, you created air, the breath of life. By any name, you created water, the elixir of life. By any name, you created the star that we call sun, the light and warmth of life. By any name, you created the terra firma that we call earth, the foundation and the home of life. And by any name, I beg that you would understand and pray that you would give me the courage to not only speak truth to power, to speak it in a righteous way, to have the courage to do all that I can to protect all of your creation. So I ask you to give me the strength as I speak today to talk about the circumstances that have created concerns that have to be addressed. I beg that you would give me this strength in your name, by whatever name I make this appeal. So now, friends, allow me to address CNN. Yes, I am a congressperson who believes that you have to speak truth not only to power, but also truth about power. So I want to address CNN. I understand that when you do this, you're not likely to get an invitation to be on their airwaves. I understand it. They have the power to mute by simply denying you access. But I just thank God for C-SPAN, unfiltered C-SPAN. C-SPAN. C-SPAN does not mute. C-SPAN does not conclude that because you are a person who will speak truth to power and about power, that you shouldn't have access to the airwaves. So I'm going to talk about C-SPAN now, because it was on C-SPAN this day that I heard one of their reporters indicate that we should, not in these exact words perhaps, but that we should tone down the language. Tone down the language. And indicated that we should probably be concerned about certain words. Two were mentioned. We should be concerned about saying fascism. Language that is incitive is the way it was put, perhaps not in these exact words, but incitive language. Language that would cause people to do ugly things. Incitive language. Fascism. And then this reporter mentioned another word, allegedly a word that would create what I would call some spark within a person that might drive a person to say something or do something that would be harmful. Incitive language. Well, that word was racism. Now, this reporter mentioned fascism and racism on CNN. Yes, I'm going to continue to demean CNN for what they've done. I know that this reporter meant well. By the way, I have respect for the reporter. But I know what's happening at CNN and how CNN has become a status quo news source. To maintain the status quo, CNN will do things that, quite frankly, don't allow us to make the change necessary to benefit all Americans. So this reporter mentioned these two words, fascism and racism, as incitive terms. Interesting to note, the reporter did not say anti-Semitism. By the way, I fight anti-Semitism every day of my life. I'm antithetical to it, and I'm going to fight it. I think we have to end anti-Semitism. I'm going to fight to end anti-Semitism. But on CNN, anti-Semitism is a word that you can use to address the anti-Semites and to deal with those persons who are perpetrating and perpetuating anti-Semitism. But you can't use racism on CNN. Racism is incitive. That's an incitive word. CNN would have us end anti-Semitism and allow us to address it in all of its forms. These are all forms of invidious discrimination. It's all right to address anti-Semitism, but not racism. If you're going to talk about racism, you have to use softer language because the word racism is incitive, according to CNN. Well, CNN, here's what you're doing. You're saying to the world, you want to end anti-Semitism, as I do, but you're saying you want to manage racism. You manage racism by not allowing it to be addressed and confronted to the same extent, CNN, as you would allow anti-Semitism to be addressed. And again, I am antithetical to, I am going to fight anti-Semitism, but I'm also going to fight racism. I'm not going to kneel. I'm not going to cower. I'm not going to back off. Racism has to be fought. It has to be dealt with because it too exists in this country. We cannot pretend that racism doesn't exist. If we're going to acknowledge invidious discrimination, we have to acknowledge it in all of its forms. And I would hope that CNN would get a better understanding of what it's doing by managing racism and doing what it can to eliminate anti-Semitism. It is my belief that we, people of goodwill, can fight both racism and anti-Semitism. And if we're going to do it, we've got to speak truth about power. We've got to speak truth to those people who have already concluded that the loss of Mr. Kirk, the conservative activist, as is stated in the Washington Times, already concluded that this was some left-wing person. And then they use plural language and say they, the left wing. If it was a left-wing person, I don't put any special boundaries around that person. Whoever it is ought to be punished to the fullest extent that the law allows. Doesn't matter what their party affiliation is. But what does matter is you shouldn't jump to conclusions. We don't have the empirical evidence of what happened. Last I heard, maybe it's been announced just recently. But I'm talking about the authorities. And for people to come to the floor of the House and make statements about how left-wing people have caused this to manifest itself, Mr. Kirk's demise, without any evidence of it. And for CNN to infer in some way that racism is a term that may have promoted what happened to this man. You're wrong. You're wrong to do it. Members of Congress who do it are wrong. And to blame the harm that was caused to some person who is said to be on the left, on the right, that's wrong. You can't blame people in a wholesale fashion for things that happen to some individual person. Left or right, you can't blame everyone. You can blame the person who did this. And if you want to talk about language that precipitates this kind of behavior, language that may in some way influence people, then you're going to have to start at the top. You're going to have to start at the top. You're going to have to start with a president of the United States who told police officers, you don't have to be nice when you're arresting people. President of the United States who told people at one of his rallies that they could assault someone who was there and not to worry about it. President of the United States who says ugly things about people. President of the United States who came right here and right at that podium where the speaker is, the podium just below the speaker, and called Democrats lunatics. It was the same night that I was evicted from the joint session of Congress, the only person ever to be evicted. President's right there at that podium. That president at the podium said that the Democrats were lunatics. Is that incisive language? Well, here's what's interesting, CNN, about it. You allow the president's language to be spoken, but you won't allow people to come on your station and talk about the racism that exists, and it does. And if we're going to talk about how these things are developed, speak in terms of individuals. The President of the United States of America, who has decided that the Department of Defense will be the Department of War now. taking us back, a quantum leap backwards in time to when it was previously the Department of Defense, but we had the good sense to understand that the Department of War, but we had the good sense to understand that it would be better to be a Department of Defense as opposed to be warmongers. Same president who says he wants the Nobel Peace Prize changes the Department of Defense to the Department of War. Same president who has promoted what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, who has gone so far as to say, let's just buy that property or take it and make it some sort of resort. Same president who went so far as to say to Mr. Netanyahu, yes, you can go on, you can do what you need to do. Not in those exact words, but that was the implication. And he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. I cannot believe that the Nobel Committee, the Nobel authorities, would ever give a person who has behaved as this president has, who wants a Department of War, who has sanctioned the collective punishment against the Palestinians, sanctioned the ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians, sanctioned ethnic cleansing, collective punishment. And I know you're waiting for me to say the other word. Yes, I'm going to say it. This president has sanctioned the most heinous of crimes against humanity. And those are crimes against humanity that are being committed on the Palestinians. He has sanctioned the most heinous crimes against humanity, and he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. President, you are not deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize. And to those people who want to blame the left wing for things, if a left wing person has done something, I'm not opposed to that person being blamed. I will blame that person. But don't blame all people who happen to be on what you call the left wing for what's happening. Don't do that. And explain what the person has done. I came to this floor. I'm here in this house now, and I'm giving you explicit things. Tell me what the so-called left wing has done. You're speaking these broad, general terms about people without giving the explicit evidence of the thing that you claim that they've done. Speak it with specificities. Have the courage to speak with specificities. You don't have the courage to speak with specificities. You just want to use a broad brush. Yes, I'm going to say it. The president doesn't deserve the Nobel Peace Prize because he has sanctioned genocide in Gaza. And the world sees it. And this Congress sees it. And not one resolution to condemn the genocide taking place in Gaza. Not one. And there won't be one. There won't be one. Not one. Few people are going to come to this floor and say it even exists. We're going to manage genocide in Gaza and condemn what's happening in Ukraine. How can you condemn what's happening in Ukraine and not condemn what's happening in Gaza? You can't do it. Not in a righteous way. Not in a righteous way. The Congress of the United States of America ought to be on record condemning what's happening to the Palestinians. And for those who would claim that they have no reason to be, that this is just something that we should allow the Israelis and the Palestinians to resolve, here's my retort. Your tax dollars are fueling the genocide that's taking place. If you wanted to do something about it, you wouldn't fund it. Those planes are our planes. Munitions, our munitions. Now someone is going to say that I am somehow creating the fervor, the incitive response that may take place because I speak the truth. Truth has in and of itself an absolute defense. Who can deny? Who will deny in good faith that what's happening in Gaza is something other than genocide? It is. And we have the blood of what's happening to those people, those innocent people, on our hands. And I started by talking about innocent people. They are among the innocents. We can't care more about some babies than other babies. We will allow the killing of Palestinian babies and maybe every now and then say something about how wrong this is. But we're not going to say that about other babies. We want to make sure that people understand that those babies had the right to life, that those babies should grow up and they should have an opportunity to succeed in the world. Palestinian babies and children haven't been to school in years now. What's going to happen to them? We've now allowed Mr. Netanyahu to go into Palestine, into Gaza, and go to Gaza City, and it's obvious that he is trying to destroy it. Yes, he's trying to destroy it. There will be no home for the Palestinians. They've already destroyed roads, the bridges, schools, hospitals. Mr. Netanyahu doesn't want peace. He wants all of Palestine. I speak in specificities. All of Palestine. He doesn't want peace. In fact, the Knesset just last year took a vote. And the vote was to say in explicit terms there will be no Palestinian state from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. Not in those exact words, but they said west of the Jordan. That's the river. West of the Jordan is Gaza. From the river to the sea, west of the Jordan, West Bank. From the river to the sea. If you say from the river to the sea, you'll be sanctioned by this Congress. We can't say that. But the Knesset in Israel can pass in that body legislation saying that there will be no Palestinian state from the river to the sea. Here's my point. From the river to the sea, Palestine and Israel must be free. Both of them. 2 states. I stand for a 2-state solution. There are others who stand for evicting the Palestinians, sending them to some other place. This is their land, their home. They've got every right to live where they live. And this war has gone on too long, taken too many lives. And what happened at the genesis of this with the attack on Israel was wrong. It was sinful. It was harmful. It was terrorism. It was something that merited a response. But it didn't merit collective punishment. It didn't merit ethnic cleansing. And it didn't merit genocide. Those are crimes against humanity. So today, dear friends, I will mourn the death of Mr. Kirk, of all of the persons who have died in their places of worship, killed at the hands of assassins, all of the children who have died in schools. It's about all of them, and all of the people who died on 9/11. And any person who is on the left who has committed a crime against another person, violence against another person, I condemn you. Any person on the right who has committed a crime against another person, I condemn you. And I speak with specificities about the incisive commentary emanating from the highest office in the United States of America. We see it, but we ignore it. I refuse to ignore it. And I don't believe in committing crimes. I have spoken from this very podium, this very area, about peaceful protest. I've indicated to people, no violence. I am a person who does not promote violence. There are people who will say that by fighting racism, somehow I promote violence by fighting racism. That's not promoting violence. That's ending the violence that racism perpetrates on people. And I'm going to continue to fight racism. But I've stood right here at this podium and talked about peaceful protest and how we must engage in peaceful protest. Peaceful protest is what got me to Congress. And it also has most of the people who are minorities in Congress, somehow peaceful protest has benefited them. And if I could cite a single moment in time, it would be at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, 1965, on what we now call Bloody Sunday. Because at that moment, when they were trying to cross and they were beaten, this is violence we're talking about. With specificity, I might add. Date, 1965. Place, Edmund Pettus Bridge, Selma, Alabama. People wanted to peacefully march. My dear brother John Lewis told me the story of how he thought he was going to die on that bridge, how they were beaten all the way back to the church where they started. At the moment that happened, and the moments that followed when Lyndon Johnson was accorded the opportunity to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1965, when he signed that Voting Rights Act of 1965, when he signed it, yes, he signed it with ink. Yes, it was a pen, but it was written with the blood at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. That's why it's called Bloody Sunday. It was on a Sunday that it occurred. Bloody Sunday. Specificities, I speak. Yes. And when he signed it, there were only 6 members of Congress who are of African ancestry that we know of. There may have been some others that we didn't know of because of the definition of what a person, how you become a person of African ancestry, blood, that sort of thing. But we knew that there were 6. There were 5 persons who were Latinos. There were 4 persons who were Asian. Since the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, all of these in concert working together, we acquired more than 60 people of African ancestry in this Congress. more than 50 persons who are Latinos in this Congress, and more than 20 persons who are Asian, have Asian heritage in this Congress. It's the Voting Rights Act. And yes, that Voting Rights Act was there to deal with racism. It says so in the act. It says race. You can't discriminate against people based on race. It also goes into some other aspects of discrimination, all of them invidious. But you can't do it. So you got to say racism if you're going to talk about the case involving race. But CNN doesn't want that to be said. Now, if this were anti-Semitism, we could say that anti-Semitism is being imposed, and we could fight it and use that language, but we can't use racism. By the way, I would support saying anti-Semitism. I would. I do support saying it. But we got to be able to say racism too. And that's what's happening now across this country, especially in Texas, where the President of the United States, specificities, had the Justice Department, a specificity, the Justice Department, to send a letter to the Attorney General of the state of Texas indicating that 4 districts, all of which had minority representation, 4 districts should be redrawn because the state of Texas drew them specifically such that minorities would be elected. But then the Attorney General for the state of Texas had a retort. He refuted what the Justice Department said. He said, no, our lines were drawn for partisan advantage. That's lawful. If you draw the lines with race in mind, then that's unlawful. You can't draw lines to prevent people from acquiring a representation based upon race. You can't do that. So the Attorney General refuted. Now that should have ended it, but no, it didn't. Notwithstanding the evidence that the Attorney General presented indicating that they didn't do what the letter from the Justice Department alleges, Texas went on. And what Texas has done is racist. But we can't say that on CNN. If we say that it's racist on CNN, you become persona non grata. You're not going to be back on CNN. And if you are there, the person that will host you will send the little signals that they send to let people know that this was something that was imposed, not something that was desired. CNN is a status quo news network. I'm not a status quo representative. I want to change the status quo. I don't want to manage the status quo. CNN does. CNN wants to manage racism and eliminate anti-Semitism. I want you to know, dear friends, that what Texas has done is racist, and I'm using specificities. I've called to the attention of the public those 2 letters, and they are available. So I have to do what I do, and I don't ask others to follow me. I am uniquely qualified to do what I do. I only ask those others who know that I'm speaking truth, don't be the one to try to trip me up. Just let me do what I can do, and you do as best as you can to do what you can do, and together we'll get things done. We have to be truthful about our circumstances, or we'll never end them. They'll always remain the same. So I close, my dear friends, my dear brothers and sisters, and I say this because, like Dr. King, I believe that there is but one race, and that is the human race. And like Dr. King, I believe that all persons have been created equal, as has been indicated and elucidated in many documents that we hold near and dear in this country. I believe in one race, the human race. And so, my dear friends, as a human being, I knew Mr. Kirk. I know the humanity that he had. I know the decency that should have been afforded him. And I know that what happened to him was wrong, and it doesn't matter who did it, it was wrong. If it turns out it was a left-wing person as defined by people, that's wrong. I'm not going to stand for that, and quite frankly, I don't know any Democrats that would stand for that. If it doesn't matter, we're not going to say you shouldn't punish the person. But I speak in specificities. I don't come to the floor and paint with a broad brush. I don't think all of my colleagues on the other side are racist. I don't label all of them as right-wing nuts. If I see someone do something, I'm going to call you out. I'm not going to label everybody. So I knew his humanity, and I knew that he had every right to say what he was saying. He has every right to say things that I would never agree with. He had every right, if ever given the opportunity, to vote against me. But that's not no reason for anybody to impose violence upon him. He had every right to do these things and walk away and go back home to his family. He should have spent the night either with his family or knowing that his family was secure, and they knowing that he was secure. He had every right to raise those babies. Every right. This was a wrong that was perpetrated. But I want to go further and say the people who have been killed in their places of worship, they had every right to worship as they chose and to do it in their various places of worship. And children have a right to go to school, and their parents have the right to pick them up at the end of the school day. The people who do this, I don't label everybody who harmed the Congresswoman Giffords. I don't label the people who did that as it was a right-wing plot or something. I don't do that. I believe that people are responsible for their behavior. And I don't know that we ought to allow this to, even on a day such as this, go unnoticed when you have a headline that reads, growing left-wing violence, blamed for deadly shooting. I believe in specificities. And I believe in the decency that human beings should afford each other. And I'm going to continue to do that because Dr. King was and is right. We do have to learn to live together, all of us, as brothers and sisters, or we will all perish together as fools. I yield back the balance of my time.